mentioned a few times that we find by the person that as we compared, we tried to understand the concept of garments the way it is by the person. So we noticed that by the person, there's or the way we met, the way we tried to compare the two. Where the person goes, I was saying, so goes the garments. But when we're talking about the neshama, it's the other way around. Where the garments go, so go the neshama. So theoretically, if garments could have, look at it like this: if garments could have gone somewhere, or they don't have to really go. I use the word go because it's something easy to understand, that you're the person wherever, if you think about it also, where the what's in front of the person, closer to the outside is the person's garments. He is within. So really, if you look at it technically, or practically rather, the hand follows the garment, right? This is the outer part, this is the inner part. The hand makes a decision. The hand makes a decision to move.
Right.
It's talking in space, right?
Space.
This is first. The garment's always first.
Right.
So the hand follows the garment.
Yeah.
It's not realistic, or it's not accurate, because the garments cannot move. But look at it like that, because they're the outer. The person goes into them. So wherever they go, the person inside goes also. Similarly, the neshama. It's not that the neshama has garments, and the neshama is separate from its garments. The neshama, if the garments are learning Torah, the whole neshama is in there. So the neshama is becoming connected via the garments to this new phenomenon of Torah mitzvahs, with the neshama on its own doesn't have. But I will just add that you don't really need to use the mashal as going anywhere. You don't have to use going anywhere. By the garments, by the person, it's not going anywhere. The garment itself bring out a certain respect, a certain honor, a certain esteem, a certain look. People invest a lot in their garments. Why so? It's just to cover themselves. They should be able to just cover themselves. Why would they invest so much in it? Because garments contribute to the person. So you don't have to really use the idea of going anywhere. It's what the garments, as they bring out the beauty within the person himself. So that similarity is also there. The neshama invests in its garments. Like we said in the third chapter, it's dealing only with the neshama experience: love, fear, understanding of lukus, godliness. Dalit, it crosses over to its thought, speech, and action, which only through thought, speech, and action a person can connect to Eibush. So is it only the thought, speech, and action of the person's neshama, its garments, which is connected to Eibush? The answer is no. When a person thinks ideas, concept of Torah, of the Mishnah, and with this he's connecting to Hashem. With this he's connecting to Hashem. When he thinks ideas of Torah, with this is connected to Hashem. The whole entire neshama itself is invested in that thought. And if you want to look at it also technically, thought is a garment to the intellect. What understands the Mishnah? Let's use a Mishnah. Your thought understands in the Mishnah, or your intellect understands the Mishnah?
I think your intellect. Right?
Yeah. So what do you need your thought for? Or
you can think your intellect can absorb it, and then your thought can maybe translate it or to spit it out, maybe.
So, but when you're understanding it, the moments you're understanding it, when you're right, in those moments you're understanding.
You need an intellect, anyways, to absorb it or to.
Right.
So you don't have that intellect.
So 100%. Yeah. 100%. It's truly so. But so does thought play a role in it as well?
I think so. I think so.
Does thought play a role?
I think so. You have to.
It does.
Yeah.
How would you explain that? How would you explain? Maybe who says you need thought? Who says you need thought? Maybe it's just to intellect. To understand. Just understand. Metal is to behold.
So you need intellect.
You need intellect for sure.
Yeah.
But do you need thought as well, or just the intellect?
Maybe a combination of both.
A combination of both is right. And not only a combination of both, this is the idea of the intellect. We said before, the neshama has as we learned in the third chapter, neshama has intellect. Chochmah, Bina, Das. That's part of the neshama. Remember, the neshama itself is comprised from 10 levels: the intellect and emotion. So that's the neshama. But when one understands something, even not any concept, what's happening is that his intellect invests in thought, machshava, and together, in combination of both, but also in the words of Tanya, it's the neshama itself, the soul, investing in its own garment, but a garment it is, it's not part of the neshama itself, and together it understands an idea of concept of Torah. Very clear. You want to break it down even more. Machshava is much more structured than intellect. Now, when I use the word structured, I mean, what is, let's just put it in the right context. What is more structured, speech or thought? What would you say? Structured. Speech is more structured. Speech. So, but the reason why speech is more structured is not to the advantage of speech from this perspective, but to the disadvantage, because thought, there's so many aces, there's so many letters a person could think literally multiple ideas within a few minutes, maybe even a few seconds. Speech, because it's broken down more, the whole phenomenon of speech is that it's broken down into words, to letters, into sentences. It's something. So it's to the disadvantage of speech, because it's more finite, it's more confined, therefore it has structure. So machshava, the reason why it's less structured is because the incredible energy which exists within machshava. It changes. It's all a person. You could stop talking. You can never stop thinking. Never stop thinking. Machshava m'shitat stomach. Not always you're thinking about something constructive, but a person's always thinking. Dibur, time to speak, time not to speak. Eis l'daber, we don't always speak. So why? Because Dibur is much lower than machshava. It's inferior to thought. Thought, there's so much more soul energy in thought. So when you say this speech has structure, thought doesn't, it's the disadvantage of speech, because it has less energy, soul energy, so you can hold it down, right? A bubbling pot, it's hard to just. When it starts to be calm, then, or someone's more energetic, it's harder to calm them down. When someone's less energetic, you can calm them down, you can hold it down. So, speech, because it has much less soul energy than thought, therefore, it can be structured. Thought has much more soul energy, so it's harder to hold it down. And then, as we all know, it's constantly flowing in, and it's hard. It's hard. It's hard to bring structure into thought. We're supposed to bring structure into thought. We're supposed to bring structure into thought, but thought on its own is something which it's harder to bring structure to thought, because again, it has much more soul, it has much more energy of the soul. Now, take thought. I just use that as an example, speech in comparison to thought, then we can understand why thought is so crucial to understanding a Mishnah. Because just like thought in comparison, hi, how are you? No, for sure. Just like thought in comparison to speech is something which is inferior, therefore it's structured. Thought in comparison to intellect also, there's much more structure to it. It says, for example, when do you start? Where does let's say the phenomenon of language? It only begins in speech, or it begins in thought? And it's not even from the perspective of Torah. Thought of the language. Do you think in a certain language, or everybody thinks the same, and language only begins when it's reflective on speech? What?
Was this thought?
Thought. Certainly, we think in certain languages. Absolutely. What do you say? You think we think in certain languages? You think we think language begins in thought, or only reflects in speech? And it was the idea of a language, English, Hebrew, and so on. It begins in speech, or
thought process.
What?
It's your thought
process. We definitely think in certain languages, for sure. Because in machshava, because that itself tells you there is some type of structure, much more subtle than in speech. but structure there is. There, letters, words, there are in thought. So therefore, and that's the reason why we think in a certain language. So in much as in comparison to speech, it's way out there. There's no comparison, thought to speech. But thought in comparison to the more inner dimensions of the soul, there's definitely some type of structure, and again, hence that's why we think in languages, because language is associated with words and letters and so on. So, and this is the reason, because machshava is really part of the garments. The neshama itself, for that matter, and it is let's say talking about the phenomenon of letters and words, doesn't exist beyond thought. Words and letters are created in thought. They come into being when the person starts thinking. Prior to that, when we say prior, we don't mean in time. Deeper within thought, which when you're dealing with the neshama itself, like we said in the third chapter, dealt with the neshama, the way the neshama is divided into 10, right? The 3 intellectual faculties and the 7 emotions. There, you don't feel in a certain language. Not at all. You don't intellectualize in a certain language. The only thing is, because it's so abstract, the idea of it's transcendent of the idea of letters or words. So if you think about it, you cannot really intellectualize without the cap or the garment in the Lashon Alter Rebbe of thought, because thought brings structure to the intellect. So when you understand the Mishnah, what's happening is the intellect, which is so abstract, the whole, like we said, it's so, there's no even the idea of letters, structure, words don't exist in the intellect. It's a neshama which is all of energy. So therefore, in order to understand a Mishnah, there has to be some structure. Where does structure begin? In thought. That's why as we said, words and letters are created in thought. So therefore, what has to be, the intellect has to invest in the garment of thought, and they both study the Mishnah, right? When we go outside and we present ourselves to the outside, it's not that how many entities came outside. You say, well, the person came outside, his jacket came outside, his shirt came outside. No. The person came outside, he's wearing a hat and jacket. That's the perfect picture of a person to present himself to the outside. The same thing, intellect, when it wants to understand the Mishnah, it invests in machshava and thought. Together they understand the Mishnah. In other words, thought itself, just getting back to the thought itself can't understand, because it's just a cap, right? The clothes itself is nothing if it doesn't go onto the person. So intellect is what you understand, but intellect needs the garment of thought in order to understand the Mishnah. So now, when the person's neshama invests into that machshava, into that intellect, into that thought, that structured thought process, understands the Mishnah, what is connecting itself to the Mishnah is not only the thought, it's the entire neshama, because the neshama is in the garment. Very clear. Similarly, when a person speaks words of Torah, it's not only that his speech is connecting to the Torah and his neshama itself is not, the entire neshama, because the person cannot speak without the neshama energy, or the person cannot speak without the motivation or anything which motivation from the neshama. So the neshama enters into those words of Torah, and not only the words of the person, which is his garments, connected to the energy of Torah, but the whole neshama. Similarly, action. So here the Alter Rebbe is going to start. This is where we left off over here. Actually, on the third page. This is which it says Ubi Pratiyut, and the one right after Ubi Pratiyut, which is specifically. You have it. Yeah, you have that page. Yeah. Here the Ubi Pratus. His intellect, it's not only his thought, which is the garment, understands, thinks the words of Torah, but his Chabad, which in the third chapter was abstract of any understanding of Torah, now that invested into the thought, so and they both together understand Torah. So the Chabad Shebenafshe, which is his intellect, is invested in the understanding of Torah, which he understands. And Pardes, remember, Pardes was the Pshat Remesh Drush Sod, which is the different levels of Torah. Right? Just to repeat it quickly, the simple meaning, Rem is the hint, Drush is the Drush of Torah, and then Sod is the secrets of Torah, which we mentioned it the week before. As much as he could perceive, and as much as the source of his soul is in on high. Actually, if you remember, we left off with this idea. We're not going to elaborate on this, but again, because we pretty much explained this, these final three words of this phrase is that ultimately our perception of Torah is also based on the source of our neshama. So remember, we spoke about Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel. We find that clear pattern. They were more strict, and they were more lenient. Why so? If you're arguing, you don't have to always have the same exact. Many people use, the right, the left, and so on. But why is this person on the right? Why is this person on the left? It's a certain character which was aligned with this person's personality. In this case, because we're dealing with Torah, which is the divine word of Hashem. How is it that Beis Shammai was always so strict and stringent and always demanded discipline? Beis Hillel says, go ahead. Elevate it, use it, and utilize it in the service of Hashem. Where Shammai says, stay away from it, because it says in Shammai came from the attribute of gvura, severity. Beis Hillel, in other words, in the spheres of Kodesh Baruch Hu's midas, and Hillel came from the side of chesed, kindness. Kindness gives much more room, whilst discipline comes across in a much more restricted manner. And so we see over here, again, I'm repeating this briefly, so even in the individual who learns Torah, it all depends, it's associated, it's aligned with his source of his soul on high. But one thing we see over here, Alter Rebbe begins his intellect invests in the understanding of Torah. Not only the garment, the intellect itself. Now, when we say the midas are part of the neshama, right? Because we learned in the third chapter. I'm just trying to say the sequence. But you'll notice, as you learn Tanya, you notice that the incredible sequence, which they'll tell in these 53 chapters. We know Tanya is generally divided into 5 books, Sfarim. There's the Tanya, which is Kutei Amorim, Sharich V'Amuna, Geras HaTshuva, Geras HaKodesh, and Kudr Zachan. And the Tanya we're learning is the first, which is called the Tanya. It's 53. Rather, all 5 Sfarim are called the Tanya, but the Kutei Amorim, these are 53 chapters. The incredible sequence of Prakim, of the way the Alter Rebbe laid out these 53 Tanya, the 3 Prakim. The more you learn it, the more you realize the not only the chachma, but the message and the way the construct of these prakim and their sequence, how one follows so perfectly one after the other, and it's connected. In other words, it's so healthy to know the previous prakim, and when every parak you learn, you realize how you're dependent really on the previous chapters. You're building something. You look back and you see, that block was because of that, and that was because of that. So I'm saying this, for example, we say the midas. What is Alter Rebbe trying to say over here? He's saying that not only the garments of the soul, which is thought, speech, and action, are involved in Torah, but also the neshama itself. So he just showed you how the Chabad, remember, what was the neshama in Perek Gimel? The neshama is comprised of 10 levels, ultimately compartmentalized into 2, the 3 intellectual faculties, and the 7 emotions. So we just showed you how the intellectual faculties are invested in the Torah. Now he says, let's think about the garments of speech and action. How do you learn Torah? The right way to learn Torah is through speech. The Gemara says, "Chaim heim l'mitzvei mepet." It's not only understanding, which that's a given in the midst of limud Torah. Limud Torah is not like Tehillim. It's not like Psalms, which you just read and turn the pages of the Gemara. You have to understand what you're learning. Again, that's a given, and no one has to. It's not even something which has to be. It doesn't have to be spoken about. In other words, the Gemara says, "Chaim heim l'mitzvei mepeh." When a person learns, it's important, it's crucial that he also verbalizes the words of Torah. So, speech in our service to God carries. It's an important component in our service to God. We daven with our speech. We learn Torah. We say Kriya Shema with our speech. And in this case, he's dealing with speech in the context of learning Torah. It's a mitzvah to utter the words of Torah which you learn. So a person sits down to Gemara and he starts learning Torah. So the first thing is we notice that there's two dimensions of it, two things happening. He's thinking and understanding the words which he's reading, and also he's verbalizing these words of Torah. So understanding, there you have the original component of the neshama, the intellectual faculties, the cognitive faculties which are invested in machshava, which we just learned about, of an understanding. But then there's the dibur. He's saying the words of Torah. Why is he saying the words of Torah? Because the Eibush that told him to say the words of Torah. It's a mitzvah to say the words of Torah. And he's saying it because he wants to do what Hashem wants. Why does he want to do what Hashem wants? Because he loves Hashem. And therefore you go into sometimes a Beis Medrash, you see people learn for an hour or two, and they're singing and they're saying, and there's a strong, they're animated, they're motivated. Motivation, animation, is a heart expression. What is their heart connected to at the time when he's learning Torah? They're connected to Hashem. He loves Hashem, so he's animated and he's motivated. And that motivation, which is again aligned with the neshama itself, because remember we said the neshama is the lower component. There's a second component of the neshama itself is the 7 attributes. One of the 7 attributes is ava, love. So that love right now is invested in the garment, in this case, which is speech. So you have over here, as this is getting back to, so when this person learns Torah with his speech, it's not only that his speech is connecting to Hashem. The midah is the love, the feeling, the attribute, that expression of love is invested in the speech. So when a person learns Torah with his speech, Chaim Himel Mitzayim, it's his whole midas, his feelings are invested and are connecting to Hashem through into that. Prior, in the world, let's say Peri Gimel, when you're only dealing with the feeling of love and fear of Hashem, but not in its connection to the mitzvahs, it was all lofty and nice, but it didn't connect yet to the mission that the person's learning. And similarly, which is B'dibur Shu Talmud Torah Shekineged Kulam, which as we know, mitzvah Talmud Torah, which corresponds to all the mitzvahs. We say it every day in davening. By the way, you'll find it countlessly in Tanya. Talmud Torah Kineged Kulam. We don't have to associate it with the author of the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe, which was all about it was Torah. And Tanya and Sfarim over Sfarim, and Chassidus and in Nigla. His whole life was a bubble of Torah, Alter Rebbe. You'll find it in Tanya, which is the constitution of Chassidus, Talmud Torah Kineged Kulam. The idea of learning, you found it multiple times, in many prakim. And the more you realize how many times Alter Rebbe learned it, Alter Rebbe writes it. Even whenever he deals with Torah, Talmud Torah Kineged Kulam. And here, right, where does it fit in? B'dibur Shel Talmud Torah. Kineged Kulam. Alter Rebbe is telling us always and reminding us that ultimately the greatest mitzvah of all is learning Torah. So again, when the person speaks, that motivation and that animation invests in the speech. So again, that not only his speech is connected to the learning of Torah, but also his feelings. Right before the words of the dibur, we see the idea of maisa also, action. We do a mitzvah, right? We shake the lulav of an esrog. What is that? It's on its own. When you look at it externally, is it an expression of a feeling, or is it an expression of action? Pure action. I took it, I shook the lulav. But what's behind the action? Behind the action is definitely a certain interest, a certain drive to God. If not, I wouldn't do it. Now, does it mean that a person shakes the lulav and esrog, he's all about excitement and motivation and love with Hashem? Many times you find people, okay, they just do it because they just do it. Or many times you ask a person, right, in the street, you want to shake the lulav and esrog? Okay, for you, Rabbi, whatever they tell you, for you, I'll do it for you, just leave me alone. Doesn't stop. In every action, if there was no drive, even the most subtle level, the person would not do it. A person by nature does not do something if he's not driven to do it. Well, you could force somebody to do it, and if he's not interested, when he's really not interested, you feel how much you're forcing him. He would scream, he would shout. When you give the person the lulav and esrog, even though he's reluctant, in other words, certain people are motivated. Thank you for introducing it to me, and I appreciate it. I forgot my lulav and esrog. I didn't buy one this year, and I appreciate. You see right away their motivation. They're so excited to do it. But let's take the other extreme, and they go, they're holding something specially. Okay, I'll do it. There's no question that if the person didn't have any motivation, any interest in doing it, they just would not do it. Obviously, you get to the exclusion if you twist their hand and physically, but we're not talking about that, the idea of compelling, forcing. Even they demonstrate the maximum reluctance to do this mitzvah. There's no question. There's some little fire burning. What is the fire? That interest, that motivation. So when you look at it externally, it's a dry action. But in there's a fire and an interest. In this case, there's a ava, a love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's why I'm doing it. Love to Hashem. That's that Perek Gimel idea. That's part of the neshama. The action is the garment of the neshama, which is connecting to the mitzvah. Love on its own cannot shake a lulav and esrog. Right? So like we said, like in the broader picture, a neshama in Gan Eden, which is kind of aligned with the Perek Gimel experience, doesn't shake lulav and esrog. Can't. It's a neshama. It's just even a neshama down here already invested in the body. If it's all about just love and fear of Hashem, that whole incredible experience, the neshama experience is dealt with in Perek Gimel, doesn't shake the lulav and esrog. So what shakes the lulav and esrog? The garment shakes the lulav and esrog, the action. But because a person doesn't do anything without some feeling and motivation, in this case, it has to be some type of a level of love to Hashem, right? He's not doing something he's doing something godly, shaking the lulav and esrog. The only reason why we do it is because it says in Hashem's Torah. Hashem tells us, do it. So when I do it, on the surface, it's an external expression of my action, which is external. External mean, again, garment in comparison to the body, garment in this case in comparison to the soul. But because the only way I'm doing is because there is some investment of feeling. So what is connecting today Hashem through that shaking the lulav and esrog? What's connected to Hashem is not only my action but also my feeling. So that love of Perek Gimel right now is invested in the mitzvah. Before it was loving Hashem without investing in mitzvah. Now it's investing in a mitzvah. So there's something special which happens to the love, which we dealt with in Perek Gimel, right now that it connected to a mitzvah. And what's so special about a mitzvah? We'll soon, like I said, we alluded to this a few times that what Rabbi is going to get to in the end of this, after this, in the end of this page in the printed Tanya, towards the end of the beginning of this page, but again toward the end of the page of the way the original Tanya is printed, that Rabbi is going to say ultimately the garments have a virtue over the neshama itself. Now, why? Because only through the garments a person connects to Torah and mitzvahs. And what's so special about Torah mitzvahs? Torah mitzvahs is God Himself. When Hashem gave the Torah, He said, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. That's how the Ten Commandments begin. Anochi, the Gemara says, is an acronym of Aleph, Nun, Chaf, Yud. Ana nafshi ksavis yavis. I took my soul and I wrote it into the Torah. I took my soul and I gave myself into Torah. So when you learn a Mishnah, you're not just getting closer to some spiritual or even godly array of God. This is the whole God is in that Mishnah. The whole God is in the Shlik and Lulav and Esrog. It's called the limbs of mitzvah, called limbs of Hashem. Learning Torah is God Himself. So because you cannot, the experience of Perek Gimel, again recapping, I shouldn't really elaborate much, but I just like always to clarify. Experience of Perek Gimel is more a Gan Eden type of experience. It doesn't connect to Torah mitzvahs. It's wonderful, right? If you see the words of the Perek Gimel, the person standing in the most enjoyable, pleasurable, godly experience, again in the context of a godly, pleasurable experience. Dal is already dealing with like shaking the lulav and esrog. How do you do that? Through your garments. But ultimately, the garments connect to Torah mitzvahs, and Torah mitzvahs, that's where Hashem is there Himself. And this ultimately becomes the virtue for the neshama, that I could connect to Torah mitzvahs through my garments. And that's what He's showing us now. B'hamidai, so you have fear and love, and the branches of fear and love, that's invested in the kiyum mitzvahs through action or through speech. And we go, there's that explanation. Then ki ha'ava, the same page, ki ha'ava, hisheirish kol ha'mach mitzvah. Love is the source of the 248 mitzvahs. That's where they draw themselves from. Ubilada, and without without the love, they don't have any existence. In other words, they issue forth the mitzvahs say it come from and come forth from the love, and without that they don't have a true existence. And where do we see it? Because when you do the mitzvahs, you love Hashem. Fact. Fact. You desire to cleave to Hashem. That's why you're doing the mitzvah. And you notice it, if you think about it, a frumiyid. He go through years, and someone who was knew about them, from he becomes conscious of the fact that tefillin, for example, have to be put on every day. So someone who, not comparing, but someone had that, he had that education. So from 13 years old to the rest of his life, he's putting on tefillin every day. Now, this is we're talking about in normal situations. In Russia, they used to take away the tefillin, but you think about it, a person 80 years of his life, or people, let's look at it in the perspective of bracha, right? Of a blessed life, right? So 108 years, 107 years of he's putting on every single day, without any interruption. We skip a breakfast, we can skip a lunch, right? We don't skip a mitzvah like tefillin. And again, people who didn't know about tefillin until they were 25. But I'm telling you, when a person understands what tefillin is all about, he puts them on, he doesn't skip a day. How much you spend in the time in tefillin, that's a different story. He's diving here. Sometimes you're caught in a certain situation. Diving with a minion, for example, you're in an airport, but we're not talking about how much time you spend in tefillin. We're looking at the mitzvah of tefillin. A person puts on tefillin from the day he becomes bar mitzvah to the rest of his life. That is so powerful. We don't even think about it. There's nothing that we're so consistent with in our entire life more than mitzvahs. Shabbos, every Shabbos. You'll notice a normal person skipped every single meal at least once. A yid never skips tefillin. Where does that come from? That's enormous. Because there's a driving love what a yid has to Hashem. That's why he does mitzvahs. So on the surface, what is he doing? He's putting some black boxes on his hand. Okay, he does it today, he does it tomorrow, he does it the next day. It doesn't look like something. It doesn't look like something very exciting. It doesn't look like an expression of loving Hashem, right? The love in the third chapter, that looked real, right? He really loves this expression. He understands the greatness of Hashem, and he's driven to Hashem. Kleis HaNefesh. Kleis HaNefesh is outgo. The soul completely gets consumed into Hashem, into the reality of Hashem. Again, we spoke about Nadav Avihu, if you remember. That sounds noble. Nadav Avihu experience. They went ahead and were consumed into the godly reality. They left the body behind. That sounds noble. But putting on tefillin, okay, we're doing what Hashem. It seems like more like the connection of a servant to a master. There's nothing. You don't see that it's his expression of love. But the opposite is true. The fact that we put it on, and I would just add, we're consistent of doing these mitzvahs day after day. There has to be a driving force behind it. What is it? It's love to Hashem. And that's what the Rebbe says. Make no mistake. Ava is the source of all 240 minutes. A person gets in the morning, goes buys sukkahs and runs to Luvanes, or before he's buying Luvanes. Every year, all Yidden do the same thing. All right, give me a break this year. No, we do it in such a level. For Mahadir, we're not Mahadir. People usually try to do better year after year. What is this? We're doing things. It's more in the world of action. You don't see the expression of love. But the answer is, the reason why you're so consistent about it, the reason why you're really doing it is because you love Hashem. That's why he says, Hashem. When you do the mitzvahs, you're loving Hashem. And you know, as we read further, you cannot cleave to Hashem only via these 248 mitzvahs. Shehain, as the way it says in Zayar, the Zayar uses it it's such a beautiful concept, or this wording, Evarim de Malka. I say beautiful, I'm not complimenting the Zayar, obviously. The Zayar is the Zayar. But I'm saying how it fits in so well, it becomes even more personal over here. It's not only you're doing something and behind it is a drive of love. This is the 248 limbs of Hashem. explained elsewhere. So when you're doing a mitzvah, what you're doing is ultimately hugging Hashem. If you think about someone hugging another person, it looks like a very physical action. You don't see on the surface any love. It's physical. But it's only about love, right? Because the only way you could physically hug the other person is because you love the other person. You have a problem with the other person, you physically cannot hug the other person. So on the surface it looks very, very physical. But it's only because there's a drive of love. That's the only reason why. The same thing, it's not only the mitzvahs, the way the Zohar says it, it's a varim love. This is the limbs of Hashem. So what you're doing is a physical action. But you're hugging Hashem. And if you're hugging Hashem, there has to be a love driven behind it. If not, it wouldn't happen. It would not happen. Right? Normal, healthy people, you cannot hug somebody if you have is lacking the love. So on the surface again, it's physical, but it's only an emotional. Similarly, the mitzvahs, it's on the surface physical, but ultimately it's a emotional expression of the neshama. You love Hashem, therefore you're hugging Him. How you hug Him? You're doing the mitzvah. You're putting on the tefillin. The tefillin is the limbs of Hashem. Okay, so just not to lose focus over here. What the Rebbe is trying to bring out in these words, in this context, that ultimately the ma'isa, the action, which is the garment, which is the lower of the three garments, that connects to the mitzvahs, the physical mitzvahs which are performed physically. And so not to make a mistake that only, in other words, the neshama itself is somewhere more that Perek Gimel experience. And in Perek Dal, which is the garments, that's what deals with the Torah, that's what connects the Torah mitzvahs. No. The action, which is the one of the lowest garment, is one of the three, thought, speech, and action. When it does the mitzvah, because the only way it performs the mitzvah, because it's the energy of the love, when you love Hashem, and you know there's no way to love Hashem only through doing His mitzvahs. So then what happens is that not only the garment connects to the energy of the mitzvah, but the neshama, which is part of the neshama, is the emotional dimension of the neshama, the love, the fear, whatever we learn in Perek Gimel, also connects to Hashem. So the entire neshama is connected to that mitzvah, not only the garment. We'll stop over here. Have a good night. One thing, before we just leave it, it's very important, this line, which it's important to know. It's just important to point out. We cannot cleave to Hashem only through the 248, only through doing the 248 mitzvahs. Someone's going to say, you want to put on tefillin? No, I love God, but not through the tefillin. It's not happening, because it's like saying, you tell the person, I love you, and you go over the chair and you start hugging the chair. It's not where the person is. And this is also part of the beauty of this word, that it's the limbs of Hashem. It's by definition so inaccurate, or not inaccurate, so wrong. It's such a wrong statement to say, I love God, but I don't want to put on the tefillin. It's not much like that. You tell the person, I love you, and you start hugging a table. Because the mitzvahs, it's not as Hashem which told us to do the mitzvahs, which that's true as well. But what the lashon is that the mitzvahs are the limbs of Hashem. So if you love Hashem, you're doing the mitzvahs. There's no other way, no way to cleave to Hashem other than following Hashem's mitzvahs. Okay, have a great night, everybody.